welcome everyone to the first episode of the Mentor Movement. I am the host, Kylie Montigney, and I'm very excited to kick off with this podcast with the one and only Kayla Coburn. She has worked in special education since 2011. She has been a one-on-one aide, a teacher, and a consultant for many students in teams of all ages and abilities. After receiving her master's in special education and teaching credential in extensive support needs, she credited a curriculum for students while maintaining reverse mainstreaming. Her master project is a three-piece set of slides educating general education teachers on how to make their classroom inclusive. If your school is wondering how to start practicing inclusion, let her help you. We have so many things we're going to talk about today, including mentorship with kids with disabilities, inclusive practices for communities, and much more. Thank you so much, Kayla, for joining us today on our first episode. We are very excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here and that what an intro. I love that you have all that information. I was just thinking where I know that I talk about all that stuff a lot, but yeah, thank
Hey, you
you for
gotta get the
fun
research
little
info. That's
history.
all to
Yeah.
say. You gotta get the research. But since you started working in special education in 2011, like what have you seen the most people have struggled with in special education since you started in 2011?
Oh man. So do you mean more like the people, like the barriers to getting more like inclusive education or
Oh
just
yeah,
like
or what kind of
people
have you
being
seen like kids deal with like anxiety, depression, like that sort of thing?
Um, I mean, I think there's a lot of, I think the behaviors are really challenging for everyone because I think behavior really stems from, they're trying to communicate something. There's like some sort of, maybe there's trauma, maybe it's an unstable home, maybe they just didn't get enough to eat today. And all of those like very internalized things can come out as behaviors, which I think is a huge barrier to inclusion in general because
Yeah.
people get really nervous when there's behaviors and they don't know how to like stop them when it really is like these behaviors are a way of the child trying to communicate something that could just be so much more than what we're seeing on a surface level. And I feel like that, especially working in extensive support needs, a lot of the classrooms that I taught in, it did have a lot of students with behaviors because a lot of them um, were non-speaking or had a different way of communicating, or we were still learning on like the best way to get them to communicate to us their needs.
Mhm.
And it took a lot of work. But once we could like, figure out, and I talk a lot about behavior, so I'll try not to go on a huge tangent, but there
Mhm.
are so many great practices out there to help support a student and build that trusted relationship with them. Um, to get them to try, to find a way to get them to successfully communicate their needs to you, which I think is so important.
Yeah, it really can. Because I have a 3-year-old nephew that kind of deals with that because he is a very shy kid. He's 3 years old and he's kind of on the verge of autism. So with him, like he kind of has a struggle of, trying to communicate, trying to get the right words come out of his mouth. And that is something that, we're trying, me and my family are trying to find resources for him to actually figure out, okay, like what can we do to support him? But of course, when having to deal with kids that are on the verge of autism or trying to figure out, okay, what is the needs, like what is causing these behavioral issues or what's causing them to burst out, it can cause so much. Make sure that this kid is very much supported in what they need, even if it's for a
Yeah.
day where they may be on the verge of being hungry or they're having a rough day. Like, it can be so many factors to really having the kid to bursting out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes a lot of observation and trying to like really put yourself in their shoes to try to figure out, you know, why are why are you doing this? Because like you have to be telling me something. Like, how can I figure it out?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and like really not trying not to take behaviors personally. I think that's a huge just like mindset shift for people in general. Because yeah, I mean, a kid will hit and it's like someone will just take it like they were hitting me and it's like, okay, they were hitting it sucks that they did hit you, but like what was the conversation between the two of you? Like, were you trying to get them to do something that they didn't want to do? Like, were they trying to tell you something, but you were like, kind of like pushing it off? And that happens a lot. And I mean, it's just a whole non-compliance thing that, again, I will talk way too much about
Mhm.
when we don't have hours to talk about it.
Mhm.
Yes, barrier, the behaviors and how to get everyone on board is really challenging sometimes.
It really could because of course when you trying to put your mind into the kid's brain, it can be very challenging to actually think like, okay, what are they thinking to actually, let's just say, hit someone? Because of course you don't know what's going on in the kid's head or what led them to have this outburst. And
Yeah,
really to try to put yourself in this position where it's like, if I was in his position in this conversation, would I do the same thing or how would I prevent this from happening? And
yeah,
it really is hard to put those things into that sort of mindset because you don't know what it's like to actually have the outburst. Like, of course, many people deal with outbursts like that, and you just have to make sure to stay calm, which I work with people with disabilities. So sometimes I can be not the best patient person ever, and that's something which I hate about myself is I can be very patient, but depends on the day and how far it takes. So
yeah.
it really takes someone that is very patient to deal with something like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard. You have to like regulate yourself to help regulate other people when you're trying to like support someone who's like dysregulated. You really have to be like, calm, cool, and collected to be able to support them too.
100%. And how has really inclusion in a classroom as a teacher helped students with special education needs? Because of course, inclusion in a classroom can impact a student's education.
Yeah. So when inclusive practices are being done well, there is so much more growth for everyone in the classroom. And there's so much research to back this up that there has never been research to support that students, especially like the general ed students, are not learning. Um,
Really?
but for some reason, people don't seem to care about that because another challenge is that you have to do inclusive education right. You
Mhm.
can't just, throw kids who have never been in a general education classroom and be like, okay, here you go, like good luck with, staff who aren't trained. If there's not enough support staff, like it's not gonna do well. Like you
Yeah.
still have to create a plan for it to be successful. But what I think is interesting that this has even just like come about, the whole having a special education classroom, is that like people, they see a kid with a behavior and, maybe they hit, they bite, they scratch, whatever it is, they have this big behavior. And so they think, okay, let's like put them in this special education classroom away from everyone. And then there's like, five or six other kids. So they put all five or six of these kids in one classroom. And now, I mean, these classrooms could be like 10 to 14 kids. Um, all with different, these behaviors and all this staff trying to figure out ways to get them to communicate, but they have like no peer support. Like they're not, when they're like in an inclusive setting with all their peers, they're seeing how all the other peers are sitting at their desk and doing work or getting up and talking to each other.
Mhm.
And like that's what our community is all about. Like you don't graduate school and then get to be in a separate room with people who are like trained to be with you. You're going to be out getting a job or volunteering or making friends. And that should be starting in school when,
Yeah.
with the right support staff and training. And of course, if a child's having a hard time, like go for a walk and leave. The child might not be participating in the school, in the classroom, the way that all the other students might be participating. But I can promise you that they are going to be growing and learning so much more in that inclusive setting than in their own separate classroom away from everyone.
And it really is a matter of what the kid can handle in a classroom. Because of course, when you have a kid maybe that doesn't like, have the same learning ability as most of the students, you want to make sure that you have a class where the students can learn appropriately rather than being behind than most kids. And of course, with being a teacher and things. Like you have to make sure you're well trained and properly can handle the person or group of students. And even if you're new and maybe like in a trainee or something, like just someone that's starting off in the field, it's just a matter of not rushing to make sure that you're actually handle it, and rather than once you're in the field and you're stressing and then like you just don't know what to do in a situation. It's just a matter of finding the right time to make sure you can handle that situation. And that is something that I only struggle with, of course, working with people with disabilities, is that like you have to make sure that you're properly trained and make sure to be able to handle these people, as anything can happen at any moment. People can have outbursts, they can throw fits, and you have to be prepared and make sure to stay calm during that situation and be able to talk them through. And it can be very frustrating. It honestly very could. I get frustrated at points. Who doesn't get frustrated? And so
I
with
mean, I get
having those,
frustrated by a lot of people without disabilities.
I know, and
Quite
like having
frequently.
like it just takes a village. Like of course with having
Yeah.
being a teacher and being able to handle these students or people, it can you just have to be well prepared to be actually be able to handle that situation.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of people would benefit from learning more about like child development. That I
Mhm.
used to say this a lot, even before I had kids. I would tell new parents of like, everyone should just take a child development class or read
Mhm.
some book about child development, about how the brain works. Um, and there are books now for typically developing children and atypically developing children. Like there's so much information, so much good information out there. And I mean, it's not like you have to take or however many years of school I took, 6 years of school to like learn all this.
Mhm.
Um, it's just out there now in like really short books. And I feel
Yeah,
like
you
it's
can just go to
so
Barnes& and Noble
beneficial.
and get development books, and you'll probably learn more in those books than actual classes, honestly.
Yeah,
It
there's
depends what
so
type of
much.
classes you take, but you can learn more in some books than actual classes, I hear from some
Yeah.
people.
Well, there are definitely, I just think everybody would benefit from learning about like human behavior, child
Really
development. So
good.
important.
Honestly, I learned so much. It really is beneficial to like learn about different things like that. Because of course,
Yeah.
you might take advantage of that from those books or even people's experiences when you work with people, like if you're becoming a teacher or you're in college, working in secondary education or what type of school you want to teach. I know a lot of people that are currently seniors right now are kind of training to go to college or being a teacher, and to really, if you're preparing to be a teacher, that's probably the best fit. Because of course, you may never know if you're going to get one of those kids that has a learning disability or someone that has a disability. Like you just never know.
Yeah. And I can like having the training to support a child, especially with extensive support needs, that is going to be so beneficial for all of your other students. I
Hmm.
mean, you might learn something really specific that's helping them, making like something visual. And then you're going to have another kid that's struggling who might not have a disability, but you're going to, kind of piece those together where it's like, do you just need a visual schedule? Is that going to help you
Yeah,
throughout? Like, we all need support. We all need those accommodations throughout our life. Um, so I really think being knowledgeable on disabilities helps with everything, makes
for
you a
sure.
solid teacher.
Yeah, and of course, with inclusion, like where does inclusion tend to fall short in meeting the needs of kids with special education needs? Because of course, with being a teacher or a special education teacher, sometimes it can be very hard to realize like what can you get the right needs to actually fulfill this kid's needs in class.
I think the biggest struggle that I'm seeing right now is being able to accommodate work on the spot for kids with disabilities. So when they come into the inclusive setting, I am very big that like every student, like that student with a disability should be getting the same work as everyone else. So when the teacher is like passing out worksheets, that student also gets it. And even if it's like a packet or where you're like, they want you to read this chapter of the history book and then you're going to answer these 10 questions. And maybe the student that you're working with like doesn't know how to read. Their goals are like learning to write their name and recognize sight words. but being able to make those accommodations on the spot of being like, okay, we still have to write our name on the top of this paper. Cool. Like maybe you'll just read some of the history book out loud to them, or better yet, have a peer near them read it out loud. And then, kind of point out to the sight words that they need. I call this the educational Venn diagram, where how do you like what is the goal of the activity that the students are all working on? And then what is the goal for that particular student, like an IEP goal? And then where can we find like that little happy, where the Venn diagram meets in the middle? Where can we find that work for them to do in class? And then having things like, a highlighter or pencil grips, or I even say having like a black paper. Um, okay, like if there's, like all these questions here, and just being able to have a piece of paper just to like hide a lot of the questions. So then there's like only one question in, because that could be what's overwhelming, that they're seeing so much writing. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is there's so many accommodations that you can do like on the spot, but it does take, practice trying to figure out how to best find that middle ground so the student can access the work while still working on their goals, but still learning what all their peers are learning.
Yeah. Like it's so important to have, people with IEP goals to learn what other people are learning. Because of course they should get the same education as everyone else, even if they're have a different learning than most people. And it takes a lot of time, even if they don't understand. But of course, that's what teachers and peers are for. Is that if they have a certain thing where they can't write their names or they can't read, and people can come over and explain to them saying like, "Okay, what do you need help with? And I can explain it to you or help you read this, have you read this to them and say like, "Okay, what does this mean? Like, do you need help with this?" And
Yeah.
it's like when doing that situation, it can help kids learn more without it'll help them learn more than what they did without anyone else's help.
And we also don't always know how much they're learning. I mean, we could be reading that whole thing to them, and maybe they are picking up the entire story, because this happens a lot, especially with people who are non-speaking. A lot of people don't feel like the people who can't communicate verbally are like academically good, for lack of a better word, that they can understand like what's going on.
Yeah.
But we've been able to prove multiple times when people get a device that they can communicate successfully on, like they'll start showing all the stuff that they know. And yes, this does not happen every time with every person with a disability who's non-speaking, but it's happened quite a lot that people are like, no, I can understand what you're saying. It's just like I don't have a way to expressively communicate that. So
Yeah.
really presuming competence. That's a
Yeah.
really big thing that we just as like the teachers need to like be talking to our students like they're students and not, you know, babies when they're not babies.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's just a matter of finding the appropriate language to speak well to the students because of course when they're reading something they might be acting like they know it but they might not like they can just act like it even if you're reading a paragraph or a story to them they could just say oh yeah I'm learning something just nod their head and they try to figure out the questions they don't know anything so it's just a matter of figuring out like, okay, is the student actually like learning or am I just crazy and they're actually learning something, you know? It's just a
Yeah.
matter of being patient and becoming to realize, okay, either lying, do I catch it or do I not catch it? You know, it's just a matter of
Yeah.
making sure the kid actually gets the learning they need to learn for college or high school or to proceed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good just to, give them the chance to access the curriculum, the general ed curriculum that's out there.
Yeah, and to get into mentors, of course, that is such a big mission for our podcast is mentors. Of course, it's our name on the podcast. Mentors can be so big for people that they want to go into a specific career field or to proceed in life. But of course, how can mentors, better support individuals with special education needs in navigating their emotional and behavioral challenges?
Well, I think having a mentor is so important, but I think what makes it so important is that they are connected with you in like your field, your like you have some sort of identifying character that you guys are the same as.
Yeah.
So for example, like some of the best mentors I've had, I mean, they've all been people in education. They've all actually been women in education. Maybe one or two men mentors have slipped in, but they're mostly these like women educational mentors
Mhm.
um, who have helped me through some of the most challenging times in my career. And for kids with disabilities, I think it's really important to help them find mentors with other people with disabilities, or other things that just like really bring them together, whether it's like a cultural background or like a hobby that they might have, but something that is like motivating uh and not like inspirational. I was gonna say like some sort of like having being able to communicate openly with them and like
Yeah.
value their opinion, and like feeling that support. I mean, it's really about that trusted relationship, which I think is so important in teaching and in inclusion. Um, so I definitely think, and I think even in like a really broader way, you could even, I think it'd be really important for kids with disabilities and all kids, to learn about the disabled community's history,
Yeah.
and being connected to, I mean, there are so many amazing people with disabilities that, have a huge platform. And so I think it'd be so great, for more kids growing up to be like connected to them, even if it's like watching YouTube videos at first or watching interviews with them.
Mhm.
Um, because there are some really awesome people that have, you know, fought the system and can be really great mentors for our new generation.
Yeah, and mentor doesn't have to be a career field, like a career field that you want to
Yeah.
go in. It can be anything, whether it's maybe having a mentor to be a teacher or be kind of a better student or become a better person. It can be anything. Like over the last year, it is finished up. I did a mentor program. Well, I was a mentee, not a mentor, but I did this program the for wishing women in sports inspiring next generation. That's a nonprofit organization. I know the people very well, and the people are amazing. And the program was based off of all the mentors were basically all women in sports, all basically in the sports industry, MLB, NFL, minor league baseball, basically anything. And it's for really people who are sports fan that wants to go into the sports industry, or you think about going but don't know what to do. And of course, with those type of programs, it could be very beneficial to be a couple months of hooking up with three mentors. That's what they did. Is like they basically hooked you up based off your needs, what you want to learn, like that sort of thing. And they hooked you up with three mentors. I think they're having an application for this upcoming year for the mentor program as well. But really, with having that sort of program to where you want to be in, whether it's education, sports, entertainment wise, having that sort of program, what and also like to become a better person can be beneficial. And of course, there's not a lot of programs like that for high school students or middle school students that really help you to become a better person or give you a better insight to what the actual industry and what they've been through is actually like. It's like very rare to have one of those platforms where you really connect with people that are actually in that industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with so much or with everything that you said. And I think I was gonna say like add that they don't need to be older than you, because I do feel like
Mhm.
that's kind of a thing that people always think, that it needs to be like someone who's like older and wiser, but I think it's
Yeah.
just someone who has like gone through the stuff that you're considering going through. And
Yeah.
like, going through school. I think becoming a mom was like I needed some sort of mentors to like help me. I'm like, I'm not crazy, right? Like this is just hard. Like it's nice to like have that sort of connection with someone that can just like, pull you out of that dark hole that we all sometimes seem to fall in.
Yeah, like I know even if like it's just a person that is maybe a couple years older than you, it's nothing different. You don't need someone that's maybe like 20 years older than you. It can be anyone
Yeah.
that's maybe at least 2 years older than you, 5 years. It can be that's not a big age gap. Like not all mentors are way older than you. I'm not saying that you should have a mentor, not have a mentor with like twice your age, but there's ways that you can have mentors that are kind of around your age range. And
Yeah.
that is also the best part because when you have someone that's closer to age range as a mentor, you have kind of more to relate to in some sense.
Yeah, that's
But
definitely
of
true.
course, to add on to the mentor conversation, like how can mentors help individuals with special education to build meaningful relationships and social skills despite potential challenges or stereotypes towards that?
Yes. I mean, I would think again, it's like really building that trusted relationship. But having a mentor that believes in the student, again, like presumes competence and is like a actual ally, if not like a self-advocate. I think having a self-advocate mentor would be even better for a person with a disability to
Yeah.
really, be connected to like, okay, you're like, and I used to work in the deaf blind field, and I remember how often we would try to connect people who lived in the around the area from each other who were both deaf blind, to connect them and just be like, and it was kind of even like a dual mentorship. Like they were
Yeah.
both kind of supporting each other in the different areas that they were struggling in. And I mean, I just think it's so important. I mean, it's just I it's just and this is like a huge reason why inclusion is it's like funny to me how hard I have to fight people on the internet about why inclusion needs to happen. Um, because there are so many, like all the books about happiness, about like, how do we become happy, or the Happiness Project, or all the documentaries, like everything that talks about how to be a happy person, there is always a tip that says you have to have a community, that you have
Mhm.
to have like a connection to someone. You have to have these relationships that are these trusted relationships to you. And it doesn't have to be a lot of people. And I think some people, it could be like your cat. Like you have to have these connections with people that and that like brings people joy, and it has been tested over and over again. And so to me it's just like, so then why would we treat a person with a disability any differently? Like why
I
would we
know.
then put them into this own like segregated room when they also need this connection, um just like all of us do? So I feel like having a mentor who has like gone through the ableism and is fighting to get more inclusion out there, or inclusive practices out there, I just think that would be so beneficial for everybody to keep, getting stronger and stronger generations out there.
So true. And like the biggest question I ask myself is like, why would people treat people with disabilities different from everyone else? Like they're the same people as we are, but maybe they have like something that they deal with every single day. Like, why would you treat someone different from everyone else? Is this a matter of maybe they're dealing with more struggles than you, or like the matter of they're being treated or can't go anywhere without someone with them? It's just like, why would you treat someone different based or not like you? Is the biggest question I always ask myself.
And what's really crazy is we are all going to have a disability someday.
Yeah,
If we continue to live and get to that beautiful older age, we are also going to be considered disabled. So it's just so interesting to me that this is like something that we even have to fight for when
I
you know, isn't this the point of life, to all be hanging out together?
I know, right? But
Get
to
along.
wrap this episode up, so I'm going to ask this question basically every episode at the end of every episode.
Yeah.
But of course, what does mentorship mean to you? Like, what does it mean to you personally?
Oh man. I mean, I know that my mentors have like I have one, Julie, and her name is Julie. She has just been my mentor through so many things. She started out as one of my teachers in, or not, gosh, it doesn't matter. She was like a teacher for me in grad school. And we ended up working together. We've presented together. We've just done all these things together. But she was a person that I would call like so upset at a new teaching position, or I got a new student teacher who was just being extremely inappropriate, or, whatever sort of problem I had, she was that person that I can go to and um, talk to about all this. And it just meant so much to me that I had this person who was just kind of like on call. I mean, not that she like always picked up because, but she was very much there. And it just meant like, and I think also me having that has made it so important for me to like pass it on, like pay it forward, where it's like, I love when people ask me questions. I love when people reach out through email or do consult calls or whatever. It's like, I want to be there and continue the support for each other because I mean, that's like what, again, it's all about, really. Um, so I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it did absolutely. That's
Okay.
such a great answer, and it's great to have, a mentor that will pick up for you at really any time that for any questions that you have. Of course, it's always important to have someone that is there for you that knows you pretty well to answer any questions you have, whether it's teaching or it's life lessons that you need help with. It's really great to have those people in your life, whether they're your teacher, of course, or whatever they are to you, having people to answer that questions can mean a lot to so many people. I know for me, from personal experience, that is something that I love about people is that they're there for you to have to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, and we're all so different. It's nice to, like I have my partner. Oh, and I was gonna say earlier that my partner, his job, they are very big of like having mentors and they
Mm.
make sure they're in like the same area at their job. Like they're very big on that. And I felt like, and then, once they go through it, then they have a mentor. But that mentor that they get like originally is still their mentor. But I just think that's such a
Oh,
great program that like I just feel like really every job should do because I know
yeah.
my first year
Good.
teaching, I was like, oh, there's a fire drill? Like, where do I go?
Yeah,
And
like
like,
where can
and
I get a fire drill to actually have a mentor at my job? What can I
yeah,
pay for that?
it would have been so nice
It
to
honestly would to have a mentor at your
yeah,
job. That would honestly be the best thing that's ever happened to a person at a job.
right?
Honestly, I would love that. Of course, there's still plenty of time. But
Yeah.
I think that is honestly a great way to end this episode. I hope everyone enjoyed the first episode, the Mentor Movement podcast. I'm very excited to see where this podcast is going to go. That of course is very exciting. Of course, I've been doing podcasting for a couple of years, so it's nothing different on my end. But of course, it's a different platform, different mission. But I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. And thank you so much, Kayla, for joining us today. I love having you on, and thank you for everything you're doing for people. It absolutely is making a difference.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. And I hope this podcast just takes off. I think this is such an important conversation. So,
Thank you. Yeah, thank
congrats.
you
This is
so much.
awesome.
It's honestly so important to have these conversations. I know a lot of people need to hear these type of topics. It's not often being talked about. And of course, to have these conversations for people to hear can make such a difference in people's lives. And that's part of the reason why, I started this because of course this should be listened to and people could learn more about these type of things.
Yeah. Well, that's
And
great.
I love it. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. See you next Thursday for the new episode. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and stay tuned for next episode. And thank you again, Kayla, for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.